It's time for Weekly Pulse, your heartbeat to what's trending in sports. Welcome to Weekly Pulse. I'm your host, Mackenzie Salmon. The college football national championship game is now set to be played against the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Alabama Crimson Tide. On January 11th, the two teams will meet for only the 5th time in program history. With that, we'll also dive into who won this year's Heisman and what our first USA Today mock draft looks like. But first, let's determine how Ohio State can beat Alabama. A sight I don't think a lot of people expected, but feels obvious after the semifinals. The Ohio State Buckeyes will face the Alabama Crimson Tide for the 2020 College Football National Championship game. Dan Woodson in Arlington breaks down what makes Alabama special, and Paul Meyerberg does the same for Ohio State in New Orleans.
After dispatching of Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinals, Alabama's headed to the national championship game for the 8th time in 14 seasons under Nick Saban. Just a remarkable record. He is 5-2 in those championship games, going for title number 6. If there's one team in the country that can maybe match up with Alabama in terms of offensive weaponry, it's this Ohio State team. But I actually think that might play to Alabama's advantage. If you watch the semifinal against Notre Dame, it was a very comfortable 31-14 win, maybe even a little bit too comfortable. Alabama got out of the gates quick, scored very easily on their first 3 possessions of the game, and then it was a little bit to go into cruise control at that time. And Steve Sarkisian, the offensive coordinator, didn't really put the pedal to the metal at the end of the first half, the beginning of the second half, and Alabama tried to just sort of grind it out. You know, they had the big lead, and they just kind of wanted to run out the clock, but they stagnated a little bit, didn't get a lot done in the running game. This is a team that's built to go up and down the field, quick scores, open it up. When you've got a weapon like DeVonta Smith, who always seems to be open, a quarterback like Mac Jones, who doesn't make mistakes, you have chances to take shots downfield. And I think because of what Ohio State can do offensively, it's really going to put the pressure on Alabama to keep scoring. And I actually think that's when they're going to be at their best. I think we're going to see an incredible display of offense in the national championship game. And I think if Alabama is sharp, they certainly go in with the big advantage.
After having their playoff credentials really questioned after playing only 6 games in the regular season, Ohio State answered any doubts with a resounding win in the Sugar Bowl against Clemson. What this says about Ohio State going into the matchup against Alabama is that Ohio State is obviously good enough to win the whole thing, because you saw after some fits and starts during the regular season, a complete football team with outstanding quarterback play from Justin Fields, outstanding defense, a complete performance of both sides of the ball, and really a performance that, if it can carry over, would be good enough to beat even mighty Alabama. But the key will be consistency. All throughout the regular season, Ohio State was a little bit spotty, couldn't play complete 4 quarters, though it was always good enough against the Big Ten. 60 minutes against Clemson, more than good enough. The same 60 minutes very well could be good enough to beat the Crimson Tide. DeVonta Smith has won the 2020 Heisman Trophy after an amazing regular season that saw him lead or be among the best in the FBS in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns for the nation's best offense and top-ranked team. Nonetheless, it's a surprising pick and borderline even shocking if you go back to August and September. Smith wasn't even viewed as the best wide receiver on Alabama's roster. That would be Jalen Waddle, who was lost for the year early. Smith stepped up and really earned this award by being the #1 most irreplaceable piece on a dynamic offensive attack. Another reason why it's unexpected, look, the Heisman Trophy has been a quarterback award for years, for a generation or more. If a player other than a quarterback ever does win it, typically it's a running back. So Smith winning the Heisman, he's the first wide receiver to win the Heisman since Desmond Howard in 1991. And Howard, who dabbled as a kick returner, really won the award for that kind of explosiveness. If you go back even further, he's the first player to primarily earn the Heisman as a wide receiver since Tim Brown at Notre Dame in 1987. So a surprise in that sense, but if you watched Smith throughout the year, saw what he meant to this Alabama offense, there was no doubt in anyone's mind, beginning about mid-November, DeVonta Smith was the #1 player in the country, and obviously even as a wide receiver, too good to ignore for Heisman voters.
This year, we could have 5 to 6 quarterbacks land in the first round. Here's where our draft guru, Michael Schwartz, has them falling in our first mock draft of the year. With the first pick, the Jaguars take Trevor Lawrence. This will not change. Lawrence is destined to land in Jacksonville, where he will actually have a surprising amount of weapons at his disposal and should find early success. That is, if he lives up to his transcendent level. With the second pick, the Jets snag BYU's Zach Wilson. The Jets have a lot to figure out, but they'll likely move on from Sam Darnold in the offseason. Enter Zach Wilson, a rising star in this draft class. At 6'3", 210, he's got a frame and a quick twitch like Joe Burrow, but also possesses more athleticism and ability to run. Basically the anti-Sam Darnold. With the fourth pick, the Falcons draft Ohio State's Justin Fields. Matt Ryan turns 36 next year and has a $40 million cap hit. It's time, Atlanta, to find a new face of the franchise. Justin Fields has all the tools to be an elite quarterback prospect. Consistency will be the key for him in the pros. With the eighth pick, the Carolina Panthers take North Dakota State's Trey Lance. Trey Lance is a pure athlete and this year's quarterback with Lamar Jackson-type upside. Pairing him with Christian McCaffrey could jolt this Panthers organization to life. With the 15th pick, the New England Patriots draft Alabama's Mac Jones. The Pats find Brady's replacement. Going from Saban to Belichick could make things easier for Mac Jones, who had a historical season with Bama, but he will have to prove he can succeed without the likes of Najee Harris and DeVonta Smith in New England.
Taking a look at the USA Today Sports Men's College Basketball Coaches Poll, the first team we have to look at is number 1 Gonzaga. This might be one of Coach Mark Few's best teams he's ever had, not necessarily just based on talent, but the sum of its parts. Corey Kispert is one of the best players we've seen in the country, and ultimately, this might be a team that doesn't lose in conference play. The West Coast Conference doesn't have plenty of great teams. Look, Gonzaga's got wins over Kansas, West Virginia, and then you're thinking about beating Iowa. Gonzaga has a really good resume in non-conference that can package well with going undefeated likely in West Coast Conference play. Another team to focus on in the coaches poll is the Texas Longhorns. This is a surprise team we didn't expect to be doing this well this season. Coach Shaka Smart, he was on the hot seat going into this year, and ultimately he's seeing a productive season. The colors meet their fruition. The number 1 guy we have to look at there is Hunter Dickinson. He's a 7-footer who really is just catapulting this team to do great things. We're thinking about Texas. They just beat Kansas and is well positioned to do well in the Big 12. Not only that, but this is a team that really could be positioned to have a great seeding line in the NCAA tournament. The Big Ten is absolutely stacked this year, and it's reflective in the coaches poll, where we've got 1/3 of the entire poll full of Big Ten teams. One of the teams we have to look at first is Michigan. Coach Juwan Howard has this team overachieving, being undefeated right now. It doesn't stop there. You've got Wisconsin being one of the best teams in the country. Illinois is great this season. Rutgers is phenomenal. Michigan State's one of the best teams. And then Minnesota's creeping up. The Big Ten is absolutely loaded, and it shows in the coaches poll.
Welcome back to Weekly Pulse. In 2018, NFL quarterback Alex Smith suffered one of the most gruesome leg injuries we've ever seen in football. After his months-long recovery, he decided to give football another shot. The 36-year-old quarterback is a huge reason why the Washington football team won the NFC East this season. USA Today's Mike Jones sat down with the Washington quarterback earlier in the year to learn more about how he drew inspiration to come back from such a terrible situation.
Why did you even feel like going through all of that and making that comeback was something that was possible and that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I didn't know this was going to happen. You know, I tried to remain as optimistic as possible throughout it, but certainly there were times that, you know, doubt creeps in and you get frustrated. But I think the key was not being afraid to put it out there and attempt it. And this has been a progression. You know, there was a long time where it was just about walking, and then it was just about playing with my kids, and because no doubt those things are more important. But I was so fortunate that things just kept progressing, and I wasn't going to stop. You know, I know I'm old in football terms, but still I feel like a young man in life, and a lot left ahead of me. And so I don't see how I could just stop chasing, you know, and how I could stop seeing where this ends. You know, I had over a year of just doubt, of wondering what I could do and what I had left, and just in the rest of life. And so for me, it was about pursuing this challenge, my kids being a big part of that, my family being a big part of that, because as crazy as it sounds, you know, coming back and playing tackle football at the NFL level, I really do feel this. I do feel like the rest of my life will be better for having done this, you know, and knowing that I don't have any limitations, you know, that I can push it and go after things, and you know, and whatever comes at me next, that you know, I can take that head on. So
Now, we've known that you aren't quite wired like other people. I mean, a lot of people would have given up after things went badly in San Francisco. The way you handled, what could have been disappointing, and then, you get the restart in Kansas City, and then you wind up getting traded. I mean, like, everybody knows you're a fighter, but did you learn anything about yourself throughout this comeback process, about your mental fortitude that you didn't know about yourself already?
Yeah, this is definitely the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. You realize looking back just how fortunate and lucky and easy I had it for so long, and this has easily been the toughest thing I've ever faced. I think you realize how resilient we are, and I think as daunting as things can seem, at times, for me, just how keeping it short-sighted, one goal at a time, one step at a time, allowed me to kind of get the ball rolling and able to make progress. There was no way I ever thought about playing in the NFL or certainly starting a game again in the NFL when I was sitting in a wheelchair. But yeah, I certainly had dreams and things like that, but it was all about a progression. And for me, it was about taking that first step and then moving to the second and so on. And so I'm just so thankful that this has kept progressing to where it is now, and I still feel like it's progressing. So still the same mentality, still just pushing as hard as ever, and we'll see where it ends.
Welcome back to Weekly Pulse. On the topic of the NFL, the New York Jets are set to have the number 2 pick in this year's draft. I caught up with our Jets reporter Andy Vasquez to talk about the insanity that is the Jets, who could be their next head coach, and what they'll do with that number 2 pick.
Being a New York sports fan in general is hard, I've heard. But as it always has this love-hate relationship with being a Jets fan. But that narrative, it feels like has changed to a feeling that this organization is just changed from, it's bad, but it was cute and kind of fun to be a Jets fan, to now, that's not necessarily the feeling a lot of Jets fans have. Do you sense the organization is getting that shift?
Well, when you have this much trouble for so long, that it becomes a thing where it's hopeless. It's gotten to the point where for Jets fans, it's gotten hopeless because they just have some of these streaks that you're getting to the point where you're like the Browns, and you're getting to the point where it's been 52 years since the Jets won a Super Bowl, and only one other team in the NFL has a streak that's longer than that, and it's the Lions. And it's been 10 years since the Jets have been to the playoffs, and that's the longest playoff drought in the NFL right now. In the salary cap era, it's really hard to go 10 years without making the playoffs, and no other team has gone more than 5 years right now without making the playoffs after the Browns made the playoffs this year.
Darnold is under contract. The Jets have the 2nd pick. They have tons of cap space. What's your expectation for the Jets in terms of Darnold's status and the direction they want to go at quarterback?
Well, it's hard to say just because we don't know who the coach is. But so with Sam Darnold, this should not be a tough decision for the Jets if they like one of the quarterbacks in the draft at number 2. Everybody is expecting Trevor Lawrence to be off the board. But if they like Zach Wilson or they like Justin Fields, this should be a no-brainer, because with the contract situation, Sam Darnold moving forward, they're going to have to pay him after next year if they keep him. And if they keep him, there's a chance if he's bad, then they can't trade him for anything after this year. If they trade him now, they can get some sort of compensation with him and then start over with a younger quarterback on a better contract. It really should not be a tough decision for Joe Douglas to make. It would be riskier to keep Sam Darnold at this point. 3 years into his career, 38 games, he has not shown anything that would make you think that he's the right guy. And now the Jets have not helped him out at all. They have not put the right weapons on him. Part of that is on Joe Douglas. It's not fair to Sam Darnold, really, but this is a business. It's a tough situation, and the Jets need to do what's best for their future. And Joe Douglas needs to do what's best for his future, because if he rides with Sam Darnold and it goes the way it's been going, it's going to cost him his job down the line too.
You mentioned fans believe this, and you kind of touched on it a bit, but from your perspective, was Sam Darnold doomed to fail from the beginning? And you mentioned him being a product of some of the circumstances that have happened in New York, or is he actually a bust?
So I don't I don't know. I don't think that he was doomed. I think that what the Jets have done played a big role in this. When you look back at his rookie year and you see the way that he played, I mean, he wasn't perfect, but he made a lot of great plays. He was playing free. At the end of his rookie year, those final 4 games, he took a big step forward and led the Jets against some playoff caliber teams and quarterbacks. They were in games with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers and in a game where they could have won against Deshaun Watson and the Texans. So Darnold had that. And then they hired the wrong coach in Adam Gase, and Darnold never seemed comfortable in his offense. And then they didn't surround him with the talent that he needed to have. They took away his best receiver, let Robbie Anderson go to Carolina after last year. I think it was just a combination of the wrong offense, the wrong coach, and not having a lot of weapons and a poor offensive line. I mean, part of it is definitely on Darnold. It's not all on the Jets, and good quarterbacks overcome stuff like this. We've seen other quarterbacks in bad situations like Matt Stafford in Detroit. Deshaun Watson in Houston this year still played really well. You should be able to overcome this stuff, so that's on Darnold, but I think at critical points in his career, they put the wrong things around him, and we're seeing kind of the worst possible timeline because of that.
Final question we have for you, Andy. The NFL draft is going to be here sooner than we think. What does this offseason and the number 2 pick represent for this Jets organization? And like you mentioned, an organization that went an entire decade without reaching the playoffs.
Yeah, I really think this is one of the most important off seasons in Jets history. When you look back at 2018, that's what we thought that was. And in a way, it was that because it set the franchise where they are now, which is coming off the second worst season in franchise history, a place that this team hasn't been in, 25 years. So they need to get this right. Everything kind of hinges on it. It's going to be Joe Douglas's legacy is going to hinge on what he does in this draft and what he does in free agency, because the pressure is going to be on the Jets to get better in 2021 and show significant improvement. And if they bring in the franchise quarterback, if he signs the right free agents, and they make the correct other draft picks, this is a team that has an easier schedule next year and could make a leap and perhaps be in playoff contention. I know that sounds crazy, but they have the pieces in place in terms of solid piece on the offensive line, Mekhi Becton, solid piece on the defensive line in Quinnen Williams. They can build around those guys if they get the right quarterback and be pretty good next year. But it has to be a situation where they get this right. And if they don't, it's going to set this franchise back for a long time. And if they do, it could propel them to places we haven't seen the Jets in a long time.
Welcome back to Weekly Pulse. Before we let you go, let's talk some Cowboys football with former Dallas safety Darren Woodson. Of course, we have our final regular season power rankings and Lorenzo's locks.
What's been the single biggest reason that Dallas has not gotten back to a championship game since then?
Wow, that's a good one. What's been the single biggest reason? Look, ownership starts, when you take extreme ownership, it starts with whoever the CEO is. And that falls right on the shoulders of Jerry Jones. That's where it falls. And Jerry will be the first one to tell you, yeah, it falls on my shoulders by the fact that we're not there. He would take extreme ownership in that, because that's exactly squarely where it falls on. And it falls on the players as well. This team has had ample opportunities, and I disagree with a lot of people that said that they haven't had a team that was capable. They've had multiple teams that have been capable. Tony Romo was the quarterback of some of those teams that could have won championships. They didn't get the job done on Sundays, and that falls directly on the players' shoulders and the coaches' shoulders as well.
256 games are in the books. We now have our final power rankings of the regular season. But instead of risers and fallers, we know we have 4 distinct tiers in the league. So let's break them down. The rebuilders. These teams had less than ideal seasons and will need to make drastic changes in the offseason to get back on track. No team feels more dysfunctional right now than Philadelphia. Who's our quarterback going forward? How are they going to fix this defense? Does the team still respect Doug Peterson? Yikes. need tweaks to be a playoff team. Many of these teams were in striking distance of the playoffs, and many had devastating injuries. The 49ers set records for players on IR. Dallas lost Dak, Giants lost Saquon. But the team to look out for next year is the LA Chargers. With young budding superstar Justin Herbert, they're one coach away from being elite. Dark horses. While the darling dark horses of Arizona and Miami missed the playoffs the final week of the season, the rest of these teams are still in the dance. But other than Tennessee, most of these teams look like one and dones, Super Bowl contenders. These are teams that will be competing for a trip to Tampa. In the NFC, it's the Packers conference to lose. But keep in mind, this is likely Drew Brees' last go at a championship. In the AFC, the Chiefs could face some serious competition with Josh Allen and the Bills.
I'm Lorenzo Reyes, and I've been covering the NFL for 7 years now, and it's the playoffs, but Lorenzo's Locks doesn't stop. So here are my 3 bets for Saturday of the wildcard round. And off the rip, let's get into a Bills team that is so nice. The work Brian Daboll has done with Josh Allen has been next level. Stephon Diggs is on the verge of an All-Pro selection, and Buffalo's secondary has some talent and has been improving as the year has gone on. At home against a Colts team I like, I just think Buffalo has too much firepower, and I think the Bills win by at least a touchdown. So give me them to lay the 6.5. I've got Buffalo 35-27. Moving on, I admit this was a tough one for me. The uncertainty of the Rams quarterback situation plus the struggles Jared Goff has had anyway concern me, as much as LA's defense can be a force, especially on the front. I think Russell Wilson's mobility is an asset in this game, and he may need to get rid of the ball a little more quickly. Still, at home in Seattle with the line at 3.5, I like the Seahawks to cover 23-17. And finally, let's close out Saturday's slate with a team that is on top of its game. The Buccaneer offense is clicking, averaging 34.6 points a game over their last 7. The emergence of Ronald Jones has opened up the passing game. The key, I think, will be for Brady, like Wilson, to get the ball out of his hands a little quickly, to neutralize the effect of Chase Young and that ferocious Washington pass rush. Tampa is too strong. I think they cover 8.5 and take this game 30-17. Here are my 3 bets for Sunday of the wildcard round. And let's kick this thing off with one of my favorite games of the weekend. The Red Hot Ravens are headed into Tennessee to take on the Titans. I went back and forth on this one, I admit. The Ravens are playing lights out, averaging an absurd 267.4 rushing yards over their last 5 games, all of them victories. Now, the caveat. They have been against weaker opponents, and Derrick Henry and the Titans are not that. So I've got a bit of a hedge here. I'm picking the Ravens to win straight up, but not cover 3 as a road favorite, 30-28. Moving on, I've been a little rough on the Bears, maybe more than I should have been. They've actually played somewhat well and have covered and won some games, sneaking into the playoffs, but let's be real. And let's look at the opponents that they beat to get there. The Saints do have their flaws, but they're healthy, and I feel good about this line, even if Alvin Kamara is held out as he makes his way back from the COVID list. But if he's good to go, hit New Orleans to cover 10 points. I've got the Saints winning at home 33-21. And finally, let's wrap up the slate with a team that unfortunately is dealing with issues related to the pandemic at the wrong time. Browns coach Kevin Stefanski will miss the game against the Steelers because he got infected. That alone should alter their preparation. But one of the key pieces of Cleveland's O-line, Joel Bitonio, is also out. Last week, the Browns beat the Steelers by 2 points when Pittsburgh rested basically all of their starters. This week, I think the Steelers cover 6 at home. I'm picking Pittsburgh 27-20.
That does it for this week's episode of Weekly Pulse. The wild card race starts this weekend, and it features some interesting matchups. The Titans will host the Ravens, the Bears are heading to New Orleans, Colts face the Bills, and more. If college is more your speed, the national championship game is set to be played on Monday, so we will see which storied program gets out on top. Until next week, I'm Mackenzie Salmon. Thanks for watching. Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, make sure to hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more from USA Today Sports.